Jim, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you, Ryan.
Well, I always love to give our listeners and viewers some context around how you and I met. And there was actually a mutual friend, if you remember this, Mike Wittenstein. Hopefully that's how you pronounce his last name. But he's in the Georgia and a National Speakers Association, and he's like, "There's this guy you got to meet," and I was like, "I'm in, rocker culture guy, I'm in. Let's meet him." And there we met just via I think LinkedIn, and we had a couple of conversations, and then randomly, you remember this? We
I do.
met
That's
each
the
other,
best
and
part of the story.
yeah, we. So there I am sitting in the Caribou Coffee in Atlanta, and you came walking in the door because out of Florida, and just randomly you walked in the door, and I'm like, I know that dude, and I flagged you down, and wow, what a small world, huh?
You were two stools, I think, away from me. I'm sitting there waiting on another mutual friend of ours. I think maybe we had done some introductions in there. I'm not sure I ever physically had ever been in a Caribou Coffee. I certainly hadn't been in that one. And just to have you sitting there, we were staring at each other, and we were talking, and it was such a great surreal moment. But hey, that's how great friendships start, right?
Yeah, man, and you had more energy in person than you did via LinkedIn, or I couldn't
Really?
believe, yeah, yeah. But that was so funny, and so that's how we started, and now we're so glad to have you on the show. So
Thank you.
for everyone else, let's start things off. Just tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Yeah, well, right now I'm basically a professional speaker, so I do a little bit of the same type of stuff that you do. Soon to be author, and we can talk about that later on. But my background really was hospitality, more than anything else. I spent 21 years at Hard Rock, so I started off there as just a staff member, a kid. I was a host. I remember seating tables. My hair didn't go up back then. It was long. I had a mullet, a really long mullet,
Oh, perfect.
which I keep wanting to bring back. I'm not
You
sure if there's
should
such a thing as a
totally
tilt mullet. Do it, do
do
it.
it.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right, all right. This is a much easier play, I can
Right.
tell you.
Okay.
But I was a host. I did that for about a year and a half to 2 years. I was a manager there for a year, and then I got into training and development. And most of that, actually, if I went backwards from there, is my background was really in performance. So I want to be a professional singer for a living, and I do have my Associate of Arts in Music and Performance and Education. But while I was at college, I discovered that to actually make a living, you had to be good. And
Mm.
so I changed careers because I wasn't great. I was okay, but mostly classically trained. So it was choral and opera and church music. So I can still do a wedding or a funeral if I have
Okay.
to.
Nice.
But that's really what I wanted to do. And because I didn't think I was going to be great at that, I was a middle school teacher for 6 years, started off as a substitute teacher. So that was my background, music and education. But I needed to have a summer job, June, July, and August. As you know, teachers are not making any money.
Hmm.
So I took a summer gig at a Hard Rock, and it happened to be in Orlando, which at that time was the largest Hard Rock in the world. And man, I just fell in love with that culture and with the people. It was just the most interesting collection of humans I'd ever seen on the planet,
Yeah.
and I wanted to be a part of that. As a way to meet girls and let your hair grow long, and actually paid me to travel and open up Hard Rock properties around the world. So yeah, I was there 21 years, and I just left. By the way, I just retired, I say, from corporate life in 2012, and just gave me an opportunity now to platform into what I'm doing. So that's my speaking stuff. And then I have a consulting company on the side. I'm a managing partner in a group called People Forward. It's a very people oriented, as you can tell from the title, business solutions, mostly for the hospitality industry. So retail, restaurant, and hotels as well. And so really, I'm not doing a lot of the day to day on that anymore. I'm doing 70, 75 engagements a year, and this book has just been
Yeah.
take forever to get out. But anyway, that's a little bit of what I do. But man, it's definitely a fun ride.
Yeah. The Hard Rock in Orlando. You said that's the biggest one, but I think I've been to that one. And don't they pump music into the pool and through the speakers into the pool?
Yeah, so there's actually two properties there. There's the
Okay.
Hard Rock Cafe, which is the one I worked in, and ironically, that particular building isn't there anymore. They've
Okay.
torn that down, and it was shaped like a guitar. It was really cool. They have another property now that looks like the Coliseum. I mean, it's just huge. It's a monster building.
Is it a hotel as well, right?
That one's a cafe. So
Oh,
there is a
okay.
hotel that's very close to it. All this, by the way, is really close to Universal Studios and the City Walk area, if you're familiar with the Orlando area. The hotel does, in fact, as all of the Hard Rock hotels around the world, they do pump music
Got
under.
it. Got it.
It's
Dangerous. As
it,
a music fan, I could just be underwater for too long, jamming out. trouble.
I've actually seen one of the things. I'm sure not every Hard Rock hotel does it, and it probably just happens naturally. But they let kids jump up on the baggage carts while they're wheeling the luggage to the room. So imagine if you're a kid, you get a chance to finally ride those things, which you know you
Yes.
wanted to do anyway, and then you jump in the pool and the music's playing in there.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Bliss.
It's
Love
fun.
it. Um, well, I know you mentioned the book, and so I think we'll probably try. I think we're going to spend most of our time talking about that because it's so fascinating. It's relevant to what
Thank
we
you.
talk about on the podcast. And so, tell us about the new book, Culture That Rocks.
Yeah, it's definitely a how-to business book. And the title itself, I start off with it being Culture That Rocks, but the subtitle underneath it is How Do You Revolutionize Your Company's Culture? And so I think this is just an extension of my brand from some of the things that I did when I was speaking. I go out there and get hired probably more for that topic than anything else. Sometimes people want interviewing and coaching and counseling, maybe how to handle a guest complaint. But the big, broad keynote stuff is around service, engagement, a little bit in leadership, but culture, no doubt, is my number one.
Okay.
And what I see from a lot of clients is they are always looking at not so much on the creating side. Most of the people I get a chance to speak in front of, they've already got the company kind of going. It's about maintaining if they in fact are in a really good place and they just don't want the culture whoop, to go off the rails. But honestly, the majority of either the associations or the companies that say, hey, we want you to come do something for us, they're struggling. They want to get back to the good old days, the way things
Hmm.
were 20 years ago. And so, if I can be a thought starter and a catalyst for them, that's kind of what it is. So I took all of that sort of knowledge base and, obviously if you're doing a 1 hour keynote, not nearly as much of the breadth and depth as you can put in 18 chapters. We can kind of go through and talk about
Hmm.
everything from service philosophy, employee engagement. I have a whole chapter on philanthropy. I do swing a little bit of a heavier stick when it comes to leadership. I certainly am going to go and talk about today's workforce, which I know is the area that you spend a lot of your time, the
Yeah.
majority of your time. So it really is a robust book that if a CEO or a middle manager or maybe even a brand new manager pick the thing up, there's something for them. They're all going to come to the party differently, but they're either thinking, I'm going to take this amount, this chapter, pull this piece of fruit off the tree to make my organization better. Or for like a CEO, maybe they're trying to revolutionize the entire thing. So it gives them a little bit of something in there. And of course, it's a lot of music orientation, a lot of band and brand analogies. Obviously, this is what you kind of get, hopefully in a written format. And my background with hard rock is certainly going to influence. It's got some currents and eddies in there, but I like talking about organizations and rock and roll bands because I think there's some compelling things where there are a lot of analogies around teamwork and strategic thinking
Yeah.
and having the right players. And boy, you switch out a lead singer and makes a huge difference. And so it does have a lot of fun in there. It does have some hard rock stuff. It's got a little bit of my thoughts, but for the majority of it, it is pure, flat out, rich, meaty takeaways to say, how can I make my brand better?
Hmm.
That's the goal.
No, it's awesome. And it is your personality just it's infused in the book. And
Thank you.
I love music. I'm in my office. I have vintage concert posters framed, and I'm a dork about all that stuff. But I'm not as knowledgeable as you.
Cycle, unlike the business life cycle, you have the background right now.
Yes.
Where's the concert poster?
Yeah. There's one over there.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, yeah, and then there's a bunch on the wall over here. We won't get too crazy here. For those listening on the podcast, you're just getting this via audio. Sorry, but no, even in the book, for those listening, Jim's got, instead of just regular bullet points, his bullets are in the shape of a guitar pick. Huh? How about that? So I love it, man. Love the branding. But you're so right. And as I was reading, I was thinking, geez, yeah, there is so much you can pull out of bands, right? It's brand, it's talent, it's culture, there's management, leadership. And so I think there's so many parallels, no matter what industry, you can really align with the book.
And Ryan, some of that, it might be a real quick line, like I maybe talk about promotability and somebody being ready. And so I might make an analogy real quick in one or two sentences about Genesis, and ultimately when Peter Gabriel left the band, instead of going to the outside and finding a different lead singer, Phil Collins was kind of promotable. He was ready. There was no other choice that they wanted to go with. So or I'll talk about, let's say, Kiss, and not just how they influence, but how they have packaged themselves in such a way from, perhaps the music for some people isn't the greatest exact music that you can think of, but from a showmanship standpoint, you can't complain about that. You definitely can't stomp on them for
Hmm.
those things.
Yeah.
And again, there might be some small little things. I might talk about something and make a quick reference to, that juxtaposition of how different a Taylor Swift and a Kanye West is, and that might be enough of an analogy to keep it in the music vein. But I will definitely go into more stories, whether it's the Hard Rock analogy, because I have a huge business crush on them. I'll have a love affair with that brand forever. But I love talking about, for instance, the Rolling Stones. I use them once or twice in the book, particularly when I say if they are in fact one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time, you at least have to appreciate them for their music and their musicianship, right?
Yeah.
Did you know they haven't had a hit song, really a hit record, since 1989?
Mm.
So I think of that and I go, we all know who the Rolling Stones are. Have not sold a hit record really in 2.5 decades.
Wow.
But when you think about the amount of money that they make, they're the top grossing act every single time that they tour, which that blows my mind. You go, think about that. Not
Yeah.
selling records, but they make more money. And the reality is it's because of the show. Like, people want to go and see Keith and Mick do their thing at 72 years old. They want to see, they don't want to hear the new stuff, right? They want to hear Satisfaction in the good old days.
Right.
I've always thought they wanted to see if Keith Richards is still alive.
Yeah.
I have this theory that it's like Weekend at Bernie's. He's been dead for years.
Yeah.
Just pop him up, put a
Right.
So, maybe I take a little bit more time on some stories to make a point, but there's something about a fine line between trying to be cool with regards to music and being too themey. You certainly
Yep.
don't want to do that. So again, I go back and say I want this to be a really well thought out strategic business book, which has a little bit of fun and flair in there. So the guitar picks and things
Yeah.
like that. I hope it does represent me, but I hope
It does. It
also
does.
walk away as a takeaway.
Yeah, and I remember reading examples from Southwest Airlines and Zappos. You got it all in there.
I do.
So let's talk about culture a little bit. That term can be thrown around, and I love talking about it. I think it's important, especially when we're talking about the emerging generations and engaging the millennials. Culture is such a crucial piece. We'll get to that a little later. But just from your standpoint, how do you describe culture? What is it to you?
Culture is one of those nebulous kind of esoteric things. And in fact, if I ever had a boss that said, we need to work on culture, or if I tried to throw that down as the culture card and say, oh, our culture is great, our culture is not great, or whatever, it's hard to be able to back that up. And so I think a lot of times leaders and businesses in general will dismiss it because of that. It just doesn't have as much of the meat and the metrics. But I think that's starting to change. It's a big buzzword, as you know. That's not the reason that I wrote the book, but it certainly is out there. And I hear a lot of people talking about organizational culture. So actually defining it is one of the most important things that I do when I'm talking about this topic. And I certainly wanted to make sure that I was doing that when I wrote the book. If I could get people just to walk away saying, I have a crystal clear picture as exactly what it is. So this is how I kind of think about it. I look at, and a lot of people will confuse the word culture and heritage. So I use that word a lot because heritage, which is, it's great. It's in the past. I'm attracted to heritage. I like organizations that have a killer story. But the reality is that is in the past. And as much as people love nostalgia, they really care about the current state of the state. They care about what's happening today and what's going on in the future. So if I'm the founder, if I'm the CEO, if I'm a longtime employee, like, I care way more about heritage. But if I'm the new guy, if I just got hired today, yeah, I get it. I like that. I'm way more interested in what happens to me today. That's the difference between heritage and culture. So culture is about the present. And the only way that I can say that is because this is how I ultimately define it. So it's a long answer to your question. For me, I just think an organizational culture is just a collection of individual behaviors. That's it. It's a bunch of individual people, each with unique behaviors that when you amass them and put them together, they're the ones who create the culture. Somebody's going to tell you it's the product. They might say that it's the cool atmosphere, the environment that you're in, but the reality is it is all about the people. I've always believed that, not just because I'm a training and development guy. I just look at organizations. Apple, we were talking about that earlier, and I referenced some of this stuff in the book. Somehow, Steve Jobs, and you and I were talking about Steve
Yeah.
Jobs before we even got online. Steve Jobs, somehow he made computers and technology sexy, from the design, the feel, the weight, the rounded corners, the
Hmm.
packaging. Even when you open it up, it's like, ah, it's great. But even he and Apple in general know it's not enough. And so they populate stores with a ton of people within arm's length, sometimes more employees, right, than even customers that are in the business. They've got one-on-one Apple Care, so you can always work through anything that you need. Some of that stuff, it's a cheap price per year.
Sure.
They've got the Genius Bar in the very back, just populated with people who know what they're doing. So it's never just about the product or the atmosphere. Honestly, I think service is the amplifier for me. It's the thing that you just sort of ram everything through, and it blows it out and perpetuates the organization exactly the way that the artist intended
Mm.
it. So the reason that I bring that up is I think heritage, which is awesome, is never as important as the culture, which is the collection of individual people. And if you get that right, then you're gonna have an unbelievably great organization. Here's the problem with that: as people come and go, the culture changes.
Right.
So 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you get these people all the time. They're going, oh, my culture's not as cool as it used to be. Well, no, duh, man. You know why? They've been
Yep. Yep.
just coming and going. And so if it's a CEO, if it's a big executive, well, then there's probably sweeping change. Impact and influence resonates in the entire company.
Yeah.
If it's an individual, if I'm the lowest line level employee, whatever that is in any industry, maybe it's not as big of a deal, but it still changes. So ultimately, when you get down 20 years later, you go, hey, what happened to my cool culture? It's just because you don't have the exact same people that you did at the very beginning. We're
Mm.
always great when you first open. That first opening crew of any industry, it's pretty spectacular. You just
Yeah.
know you can't keep on to them.
Yeah.
But just got to figure out a way to get the right ones on the bus. And when that happens, you can get back to creating whatever culture you want. So
You,
that's my long definition.
you
Just a
need
collection
you
of
need to find the guys with mullets. Those are the guys that really bring the thunder to your. Yeah. No.
front party in the back, they say.
Yeah.
Sure.
I love one of the lines in the book too. You say unique people create unique experiences, and I'm sure that was something you experienced to the nth degree at Hard Rock. Um,
It is, yeah. And maybe it's a little bit too far. I mean, I don't talk about it as often. I do think you need unique people. So, whatever that means in your company, go and find the most talented people who maybe are a little bit off center. I just think there's a little bit of a certain crop of crazy that if you can somehow figure out to get them into the business, they will, in fact, create experiences. Hard Rock, it's just not fair because it's a wonderful palette with which to paint. I probably was around some pretty unique people, and I think about it as being the island of misfit toys. Remember that
mm,
in Rudolph
yep.
the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Yep.
It's the place where Rudolph and Hermie the elf stumble upon. It's got the wagon with the square wheels and the boat that won't float, and instead of a Jack in the Box, I got a Charlie in the box. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Nobody wants
Yeah.
a Charlie in
Yeah.
the box, but I love it. It's a place where all toys go to live because nobody loved them for the way that they are. So
Yeah.
Hard Rock, and there are other brands too. I think Southwest does it, Starbucks does it, probably Apple a little bit, Zappos for sure. They get people that could not fathom being somewhere else. They were
Mm,
a square peg in a round hole, dying in some other company, and somebody allows them to have that freedom and diversity. Man, get out of the way. That
right.
you get with that is brand loyalty.
Yeah.
So I love being around people that are interesting. I know it probably freaks out a lot of companies, but unique people, it's going to happen. You're going to get something. I'm not sure what it is, but
Yeah.
not knowing what's going to happen to me is part of the experience.
You mentioned Zappos, and they are such a great example. And I love what Tony Shea says. The founder. It's yeah, the head monkey. Nice.
That's what he calls himself. Yeah,
Does he really? Oh, yeah. He probably doesn't have a title. He talks about work-life integration, and it's kind of their belief that why should it be work and life? At the end of the day, it's all just life, right? So shouldn't you love, like you're saying, shouldn't you love the culture, and shouldn't you not want to be anywhere else, but where you spend most of your time
that's
at
right.
work? And so you mentioned, the popping, people coming in and out. And for millennials, I mean, the average tenure is 2 years at an organization. So people
Yeah.
go crazy, recruiting and finding new people and trying to retain this generation. So tell us your perspective on it, and kind of, how much of the millennials and generational aspects do you mention it in the book?
I actually mentioned it a lot. I think I maybe said there were about 18 chapters. I've got like a prologue and an epilogue stuff. Three of the chapters, if I remember correctly, three or maybe four, are dedicated, in fact, to I say today's workforce because I
Hmm.
started, again, if I've been writing this thing for about 5 or 6 years, imagine if I was to spend another 5 or 6 years. By the time I get this thing out, millennials are way already
Right.
here and already in the business. So
Right.
I,
Right.
I, I sort of split it up a little bit to say today's workforce, which is not just the millennials. I think you use the term Gen Z or Generation Z. I call them the digital natives
Yep.
or the I generation. They were born with technology as just a part of their everyday life. And so I don't know if you're a fan, just to show off my geekdom. I love comic books and I grew up on Star Trek and,
Nice.
all the fun things that we did as kids. So Star Trek, and I don't know if you can tell behind me, I've got Star Trek memorabilia.
There
That's
they are.
I equate today's millennials and even that next generation to a race of beings in Star Trek called the Borg. So if you know anything about the Borg, they're half human and half robot. They're cyborgs, and they
Okay.
can't live one part without the other. And so, I get the same reaction that I get from you right now, which is there's laughter, from all the guys, and then the girls are like, "Huh? What? What's?" But my analogy is, I think that now kids today, and I really do say that kids for the digital native. So I have 15-year-old twin daughters.
Oh wow.
They look like the Borg. They have wires coming all inside of them
Hmm.
and coming
Hmm.
out and lights and everything because they're on their iPad. They can text their friends. They've got the TV on. They're listening to music, doing their homework all at the same time, which
Yep.
no way could I do that as a Gen Xer.
Cray cray.
I'm a linear dude. They got no problem in doing that. So what I wanted to do, and I know I'm talking a little bit about technology, but between the millennials who are already here and the digital natives, this Generation Z, these are the people that we have to start figuring out. And some brands are not going to do it. They're scared to death. They think it's just a big issue. They might talk about, I don't know, work ethic issues or whatever baggage might come with them. But there are, in fact, some really awesome, great people working. Maybe not in the industry you're looking for, and you perhaps are going to have to go and mine for them. But I am on the hunt looking for these unbelievably great kids. And if I can find one or two out there,
Hmm.
figure out a way to get them in my business. I know they come with some baggage, but if I can give them some flexibility, I know diversity, they relish it. They want that. I know if I can tap into their technology savvy and knowing they're dependent on it anyway,
Yeah.
and you start tapping into some things that are even broader than the business from a philanthropic standpoint. So I talk about being purpose driven, and you can say anything you want to about the millennials or the kids of today. One thing you cannot stomp on them is they care quite a bit about the planet and its people and what we're
Sure.
doing. And so when you start thinking about these types of things, purpose driven, philanthropic, giving them some flexibility and allowing that individuality to flourish, allowing them to utilize technology. Don't shy away from it. Figure out a way to put this into the
Hmm.
brain. All of a sudden, I think you're a world beater. I think you absolutely can go through and find the absolute best that you want to versus no, 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 no. They're going to have to conform to my business.
Right.
All right, well, good luck with that, dude, because you're going to run out of people at some point. The
Yeah.
the millennials, they're already here,
Right.
and the digital natives, this is your pool of people to pull from. So some are going to have to figure it out. So I think I wanted to spend a little bit more time when I talk about culture. I wanted to be, of course, I wrote the book to try and be timeless, but this is one of those times where you go, I can't not talk about the
Hmm.
force today. So I spent probably more time on that, maybe as much as I did in service than just about any other concept in the book.
Yeah. No, it's well said, and I try to coach my audiences and let them know too that we're not. My message isn't we need to conform for the millennials. It's more of I see the millennials as a signpost for the change that's coming.
Yep.
And really, they're just the warning sign of all the culture shifts that the internet, technology, and the largest generation on the planet are all cumulatively creating. So really, it's kind of a time and period, like you said. It's just a time that we just need to start changing. Think about our culture. How do we reset, redial, and launch forward?
But you
'Cause
know what's cool is this is one of those opportunities where I think the speaking engagements, the talks that I get a chance to do, this is where I think maybe we can play some Jedi mind tricks on people to get them to think differently. Because unless they pick up the book, and by the way, I've got a little sample of the book.
there
It's
it
not out
is.
yet. This is the one that'll eventually come. As you kind of go through that thing, it, it'll start to hopefully be a thought starter for you. But I know that people are just going to struggle with change. I mean, they
Mm,
always have. It's the one thing we can guarantee. But
yep.
they're going to have to think differently, and if they don't like change, you're really going to hate extinction. They have to think differently at some point. And
Yeah.
You were making a comment earlier, and I think it is true that I think that we need great workers today more than they need us. And I say that even in an environment where it's high unemployment, I think if you're really good, if you're a rock star, you can always get another gig. It's not a problem for you.
Hmm.
We don't want the mediocre. I don't want the ones that have that entitlement kind of thought. And of course, there's all kinds of issues socially. The way people are brought up, things are just a little bit different than probably you and I. But there are still some spectacular people out there that have
Sure.
killer values, and when you find them, I would do anything to try and get them on board. We need them big time, more
Yeah.
than they need us, because they'll laugh at us if we're not the cool culture environment that they want. They're out
Right.
of it. They'll go somewhere else. I'm convinced.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, it's just we live in a very transparent world today. And so I think letting your hair down at work is more acceptable now than ever before.
Or up.
So I think people can start stepping out a little bit. And I think, too, having dual personalities, a work personality and a work personality and a personal personality is out the door now. I think you need to be who you are all the time. And I think that authenticity, especially, is what's going to connect with emerging generation as well.
I got a great friend of mine named Jason Seiden, and he uses the word personalization. It's
Per,
personal and professional. And
uh,
so and I'm not sure if you do this, but for me, when you go onto my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my Facebook page, I put it all out there. I might be talking about something personal an
mhm.
hour from now, but I'm also bringing some of the strategic professional stuff in there as well. I just made a decision. I wasn't going to have one and the other. I just wanted to let it all fly out there. And I think
Yep.
now that's what's happening is society's just having those two areas just sort of morph into it.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any hacks, Jim, as far as how to how do we culture hack our own organizational culture to make it more appealing to this next generation? Any recommendations there?
Oh man, that's probably the $1 million question. That's what the whole book's about, right? I guess it would depend on where the organization is. I would guess that I don't know, maybe in your audience, most people would say my company's doing a fairly good job in a lot of areas, and I could get better in others. So, hence it might not be a revolution; it's more of an evolution on a couple things. But I would go literally everywhere from, maybe around the employee life cycle, because again, I'm more of a human resources training and development guy. I'm very people oriented. So
Hmm.
I would look at those people, especially if you believe in that definition, that it's just a collection of individual people. So I'm going, how am I going to recruit and interview and hire and train and develop and reward and recognize, and even the way that I separate from people, whether I take them out or they leave on their own, there's a process along all of those. And if I just think about one great thing that I can do in every area of that employee life cycle, I see you have business life cycle behind you on the board, but on the employee side, same thing. Like there's an area for all of these that I would be trying to go, what can I do to make it better? When you're looking at the book, I get down and dirty and pretty weedy in some areas, like how do I make really cool print material? Some companies are never going to use print.
Yeah.
I mean, some are even laughing at me, going, "What is this paper print thing that he speaks of?" But if you're going to do it, which a lot of companies still have, whether it's a poster or a manual or a wallet card or whatever, I would be thinking more like a comic book or IKEA furniture instructions or an airline safety card, like all
Mm.
visuals, no words. I mean, and that's going to help with people with learning disability or dyslexia or English as a second language. It's a big deal at Hard Rock when you're global and all over, or here in the US, if perhaps people that are working in some very specific jobs where English just is their second or third language, materials you might have to think about it. I do think about leadership quite a bit, and all of these things that you might be doing are going to be for naught, or at least it's a harder uphill battle if, let's say, the person at the top, this just isn't their thing. They're not into culture, they don't believe in it, they manage the business through threats and fear and punishment. They
Right.
try and muscle the result versus seeing the beauty of their organization, which is through their people. Perhaps they only are sales and profit oriented, and they're not so much on the people side. So I think leadership's a part of it. If here would probably be my one big takeaway. I think probably more than anything else, because I would assume that a lot of people that are in your audience might be a middle manager. They're not a CEO, perhaps they're not running the thing, or maybe they're an entry level manager going, I just want to make my job a little bit better.
Yep.
I think the concepts are still relevant. It's all scalable, and so if I just think one of the greatest concepts I ever learned when I was doing some stuff with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I was licensed with Stephen Covey's organization, still very popular program or process out there, which we used at Hard Rock. One of the greatest ones ever was this concept of circle of influence, circle of concern. So the circle of concern are things that I care about. I'm concerned about it, but I can't do anything about it. And so we wind up moving around in this world out here in water cooler conversation and gossips and, what's going to happen to my company? Are we getting bought out? Are we downsizing? Do I care about it? Totally. Can I do anything about it? No. But the smaller circle, the circle of influence, is the one you can directly control.
Mm.
How you spend your money, my attitude and my behaviors. So I always got to a point, whether it was with my team at Hard Rock or even my own world, when things started to get crazy out there, or if I really wanted honest to goodness change, I just lived my life in that circle of influence, all of that. And then you get some wins there and you don't worry about all the other stuff. And hopefully you get recognized and you wind up getting a much more influence and impact, and that scope starts to grow. And then you really do get into the areas that you were probably concerned about as you get more responsibilities. You become promotable. So the reason I mention that is I think if you're a middle manager, let's say, regardless of the business, in my world back in the day, it was hospitality. If I'm running shifts, the boss isn't around. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway.
Yeah.
It's within the guidelines, not to get in trouble. But if I had 20, 30, 100 people that I was responsible for, I would make it the absolute best environment and shift that I could. I'd have some laughter. I'd look people in the eye. I care about them. I would somehow ask about their hopes and fears and what's going on with their life. And all of a sudden, the brand and the big boss isn't as important as you are as a manager in that particular area.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, your influence again is going to grow. So although I probably don't spend a tremendous amount of time on that in the book, I do say that it is going to work for everybody. You're going to have to pull some things out of it and go, here are some things that I could directly do for my business. It's not going to be scary. It could be things that I do already every single day, and don't get into this mindset that, oh, I can't make any change.
Mm-hmm.
I really do believe that you can make things happen. Revolutions get started by a single person with a great idea.
That's right.
So you just need to come up with that great idea and say, I'm going to stick to it. And if it's not for me, then perhaps it's not the company for you.
Yeah.
And you should be okay with that. The cool thing also, though, that if you are in fact the CEO, then of course you get to make broad sweeping changes. So the book is just chock-a-block full of different ideas and case studies and storytelling and a few statistics. And, hopefully all those suggestions can resonate with just about any company in any industry. In fact, there's a couple case studies in there that I do around healthcare. I talk about automotive service repair. One of my number one clients right now are funeral directors. So I
Interesting.
If you can go in there and change the culture of those companies or even some of those industries, forget about it. I think you could do that with just about any industry. So, like I said, everybody's going to come to the table a little bit differently, and hopefully I tried to appeal to everyone in there.
One of the things too that really stuck out to me, and of course you've got so much stuff, good stuff in there. I tended to obviously hype your focus on some of the generational stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the things that I was taking notes on, Jim, while reading it was this idea that the millennials are experience obsessed.
Yeah.
And it's so true. They're very experience obsessed because they grew up with the world at their fingertips, so they're looking for stuff that they can't get on Google, right?
Yep, exactly.
And so you gave some awesome, really tangible hacks on how people can create these very great experiences within the culture of their organization. And you gave a ton of them, and I was thinking all of those are really good. And, I think we hear a lot of those, but there were so many there that I had never heard about either. So I guess I just wanted to throw that in there as well. That was really helpful for me as well.
Oh, great. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know which ones really resonate with you, but it could be small little things like, just taking a few seconds to write a handwritten thank you card is a big deal. That means something to the millennials. It could be in an environment, Hard Rock, again, you got away at least for a while and doing some beer 30s. You set something up.
That was one of my favorites.
That was one of the ones that tends to be.
Yeah, of course.
But it could be small little things. So, a gift card here, you're going to buying a Slurpee or something for the group. You know what people's coffee drinks are. And just not all the time. Every once in a while, you surprise and delight people. You go to Starbucks and you get their drinks or just a couple of people, whatever it is. Maybe it's this person needs something at this point because differentiation is the key. So, when I started the beginning parts of Culture That Rocks, the book is really about the end user. I do talk about differentiation when it comes to a service mindset and how you can create that. But, a big swath of the book is also about the internal culture. So the parts that you're talking about is, I believe that people want differentiation even in a work environment. So you can't you can't just come with the bells and whistles. And I'm not recommending somebody go out there and start spending a whole lot of money to do a bunch of things, especially if it's going to completely change the character of who you are.
Hmm.
But I think if you can naturally just start to think, what can I do to make my business better? Because at least in hospitality, turnover, people leaving, is the root of all evil.
Mm.
Now, if you cannot get people to stay with you longer, man, you never get to the sweet stuff. You never
Yep.
get to the really cool develop. You're a hamster on the wheel, constantly training and developing, and somebody comes on board, and guess what that does to the culture? Once again, it gets watered down. It's like a copy of a copy of a fax of a copy. It just you
Mm.
can barely even see the culture 5, 10, 15 years from now. So, I am about differentiation. I think people, for the most part, are on the hunt to experience something different because it's just a world of sea of sameness right now, right? It's mediocreville. And I really do believe that. I think somewhere all these businesses, it used to be phenomenal 20 years ago when I was growing up. I think they all got together in some conference 2 decades ago and said, let's just be mediocre for a while because I feel like it happened. And so
Yeah.
the
Interesting.
companies that you talk about and I talk about, it's the ones that, there's a reason why we all keep talking about
Yeah.
Zappos and Starbucks and Nike and Apple. And of course, because they're doing things right.
Yeah.
So if I were a business, I would want to be on that list. I would want somebody to add me on that list of top 10, 15, 20 companies. But that doesn't happen by accident, brother.
Yeah.
You've got to spend some time and energy on it. And so hopefully the chapter that you were reading, when we go through all those things, if people just took two or three and that was it, because you're not going to be able to do all of them. But if you did a couple of those, it would revolutionize the internal culture.
Mm.
And then if you just buy people, you get them to stay with you a little bit longer, spectacular things happen, man. You become a world beating brand compared to your competitors.
Love it. All right. Well, as we wrap up here, we're gonna get into questions that we ask each of our guests. I'm not sure you knew these were coming, so buckle up. Any final advice on culture before we move into those?
I would say that there's some pretty good resources out there. I think if people were to do their own sort of self-study, I actually have a free cultural assessment I could send people, and you look at it and look at yourself in the mirror and share it with your teams. It's a pretty good start. I don't think it's brain surgery, but if you need some resources, I've got some of that stuff, and I'd love to be a part of that. But we need great cultures out there. You certainly don't want everybody to be spectacular, but when I'm in shop world, when I go and eat and drink and sleep and play somewhere, I need to have some pretty awesome brands, and hopefully, the people in your audience can do that and they can develop it. I'm on the hunt. I'm looking for it myself.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, so we ask these questions to all of our guests, but is there an app or a web tool like an Evernote that you're just obsessed with and that just helps you in your business today?
Well, I probably two. So I don't know if it's really more of an app than anything else. I'm a huge fan, as you noticed from the chapter on philanthropy. So I support No Kid Hungry.
Nice.
So No Kid Hungry is the largest organization that focuses on childhood hunger. So for me, this was the right and appropriate organization because I've been 30, 35 years now in food service and they deal with hunger. And so, unlike a lot of other great, awesome, deserving charities, we know the answer to hunger, and it's food. And there's a lot of food going to waste out there. And so, a portion of the proceeds from when I speak and also in the book go to No Kid Hungry. So, I push out a lot of their Twitter information. I go to their website quite often, and I try and prop that business up. I use a piece of technology in all of my sessions called Poll Everywhere, polleverywhere.com.
Nice.
Again, not really an app as much as a website, but it does some real-time audience polling, which I understand is becoming very big in academics. So people are starting to do a lot of testing, whether it's true, false, fill in the blank. Some of it is pretty open-ended, and you can fill out whatever you want to. So I now use that. So this is a great moment when I'm talking about especially the digital natives, but even in the millennial portion, I will have everybody get out their phones during the session.
Mm-hmm.
So this is awesome about these text polling. You used to have devices. Now you don't. Everybody's got their own. They go to the website, or they could do old school cell texting if they got the little flip part on their phone. I don't judge.
Who has the?
And there's always a couple, and it's hilarious too. So I throw out a question. And not only am I trying to find out the answer to the question, like how prepared are you to train, communicate, deal with these digital natives?
Mm-hmm.
Are you extremely prepared? Are you getting there? Do you feel like you need a little bit of help? And oh, I just barely figured out the millennials. So whatever. So there's a little bit of funny in there.
Yep.
And when you fill it out, it populates real time into your slides. It's very, very cool. Not only am I interested in the question, I'm actually trying to showcase the technology going,
Sure.
this is how you ought to be communicating and
Yep.
testing your folks, because this is what they expect now. So there are some really good apps. I've got a good friend of mine who, in fact, develops apps for a living. I haven't got enough of those where I'm actually utilizing those, and I probably should in my sessions to feel like I'm more in line.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Nope.
those are two pieces of technology, driving people and talking about No Kid Hungry, but certainly on the on Poll Everywhere, I think is a pretty cool tool.
It is. I use Poll everywhere as well.
Oh, you do?
Phenomenal. So I'll put notes in the show notes, or put notes. I'll put links in the show notes for those listening.
Oh,
And
cool.
and then the last one is, how can people, actually, before we get there, is there one book or a resource, Jim, that's been a catalyst for you in your career and business?
I was a big fan of Tom Peters, so
Okay.
there are probably a lot of people in your audience who don't even know who that guy is. He's an old school business guru, but between the Seth Godin, who's out there right now, believe it or not, Stephen Covey was a big one, but Tom Peters was really big. Now, there's some people that are good friends of ours that we talk about, like Molly Fletcher and
Mm-hmm.
Kat Cole and Amanda Height, some very good friends of mine. Some of them are published, some of them are not. Scott Stratten, if you know his material, it's hilarious and very, very relevant. He's got a book called Unmarketing, just came out with a new book called Unselling. He's got a flip book, which is hilarious. It's the business book of being awesome. And if you flip it on the backside, it's the business book of being unawesome, and how it's a flip book. You actually have to flip it over halfway through.
Gotcha. Interesting.
He does some really good stuff, and I love propping that guy up. I mean, he doesn't need my help. He's pretty well known, but when I read his stuff, and when I even go back to some of the older successful businesses, Sacred Cows Make the Best Burgers, and Raving Fans, and Who Moved My Cheese. If you were to see my library of books, unfortunately, I'm not reading a lot of fiction. A lot of it is, in fact, business books. And I'm sure that's what influenced me to write a how-to business book that was around culture. Some good friends of ours that do stuff, Eric Chester, Chester Elton, and in fact have done some stuff around generational training and culture. I wanted to put all of that stuff in the book. And I reference some of these guys in the book as well.
Awesome.
Thanks for asking. They're good folks.
They are. They are. Lastly, how can people get more of you in the book?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Probably the title of the book is Culture That Rocks. So culturethatrocks.com is how you can at least drop into that. It's a great landing page. Don't exactly have the pre-order up yet, but it'll be here in the next few days. But there's my free cultural assessments there. There's some book excerpts, and I got a little video and some other stuff. You could also get there through my business, which is knightspeaker.com, KNIGHT speaker.com. And you can see all kinds of stuff. I've got video and my bio and client list and all the topics that I do. If somebody were interested in hiring me. And then, of course, when the book goes live, we'll have it on Amazon as well if those other areas don't fit for you. So a little bit of everything. And my Twitter handle is @knightspeaker. And I'm pretty good about responding to people as well.
You are. You're all over, man. You're everywhere.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying. I'm hustling right now, right? I'm hustling. But that's how we met. So
That's right. That's right. Well, Jim, I mean, needless to say, man, you rock. Thanks for coming on the show. Your work matters, man. So keep sharing it with us.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. That's quite kind. Thanks, Ryan.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, buddy. All right. Bye-bye.